Welcome to the second video in our Spring Data JPA series. In case if you have missed the first video of our Spring Data JPA series, I'll provide it in the end card, and also I'll be providing it on the I button. So please check that out so that you will have more clarity when you go through this second video. In this video, we will dive into entity mapping and explore how to perform basic CRUD operations like create, read, update, delete, etc. All these operations we'll be seeing. So basic operations we'll be seeing in this video. And then let's see what is @entity annotation before going into our coding. So to define, so how can I say is to define a relation to define relation between the repository tables and your POJO classes, which we can also call as entity classes. So we will use these entities. So for example, if just imagine you have a user table and we have different columns like user ID, user name, address and phone number. So we will create the attributes within the same user POJO class or entity class with the same column names. So for user ID, I'll be using user ID like username, address, and I'll be providing all those attributes. And we will be annotating this POJO or this entity class with @entity so that it maintains a relationship with our user table. So let's go ahead and see other annotations which also will be mainly using in our JPA. So apart from entity, we will also be having different annotations like ID, column. For example, here in my POJO class I have defined it as uname, whereas in my table I have the column name represented as username. So here both the names are not matching, right? In order to establish a relation between this column, so we'll be mentioning @column annotation on top of my attribute, and we'll be providing our user database column name here in name. So in this way, we can maintain the relation between the database column as well as our entity class attribute, even though the names are different. And we will also be having @ID, where we will be defining our primary key. Here if you imagine user ID as our primary key, in our attribute in our POJO class we will be defining @ID for that primary key. And also we'll be having different annotations which we can be used in @ID like generated value, and we'll be having different generator what we call strategies and all. So we'll be seeing them slowly one by one. So these are like some of the annotations which we will be using apart from @entity, like we'll be having entity, ID, column and all. So let's go ahead and check some code. So firstly, let's go to our workbench which we have installed, which you have seen installing in our first video. So let's go to our MySQL workbench, and now let's create a table. I'll be giving this script which I have used for creating the table in the description. You can go through that. So first you can create database. I have created a sample database like jpadb, and you can use the jpadb database, and you can create your own employee table. Okay, so once you created employee table, you can just click on the select start from employee table. So you can see as of now there is no data in our employee table. So let's go ahead and write some code in Spring Tool Suite using JPA and see how we are gonna deal with JPA. Okay. So before going into the coding, let's see what are the few things which you need to set before. So you need to go to application.properties, and you need to provide your URL of MySQL which you have installed. So this will be common mostly till 3306 if you haven't changed your default port. And this is the database which I have created. If you remember, here we have created jpadb database, right? The same I have used it here. And then we can give our username, password, and here I am also giving show SQL equal to true, in the sense like it will display the queries in our console. So here, for you to make it more clear and understandable, I am just making it true so that you can see what queries are what queries are being used by JB or Hibernate, and you can see them in our console. So we'll be having three packages. One is the application package, where we'll be having the main class running over here, and we can create one more package with entities, and we can create one more package with repos, and by default you'll be having your test package. So this is our main class from where our code will get started. And now let's go to entities and let's create our employee class, employee entity. So I'll say employees. So here I'll be defining the column names as attributes. So if you see here, these are the columns which we have: ID, name, designation and salary. So I'll just go and say private int ID, private string, I'll say uname, ename, employee name, private, what else we have? We have designation, private string designation, and let's take salary in double. I'll say private double sal. And now let's create some getters and setters. Let's go to source, let's click on generate getters and setters, let's select all and then generate. So now let's annotate our Pojo class. We can say @entity. As we have discussed before, @entity is the one which makes the relation between our Pojo class and our database table. Here I'll say @id. So I'll click on Ctrl+Shift+O just to import. So in between, while going through the code, I'll also say some of the shortcuts which I'll be using so that it will be useful for you if you are not aware of that, or if you are aware, you can ignore that. So Ctrl+Shift+O we can use in order to remove unnecessary imports, or in order to import if you are using Windows and Spring Tool Suite. And here if you see, in our table we have the column name as name and designation, whereas in our Pojos we have it as ename and designation. So in order to make it related to the database column name, we can just mention @column, and we can provide the name of the column which we have used in our database. Here again I'm clicking on Ctrl+Shift+O, so it's importing @column, and even the same on our designation. I'll say column name equal to designation and @column. You can either do this, or you can also give the same name as you can give the same name to your attributes as how it is in your database. So just to make you understand, I'm using a different name over here in my Pojo, and I'm mapping that to the name which is present in our table. It's salary, designation, name and ID. So ID, name, designation and salary, right? So our entity class is done. So now let's go ahead and create a repository class. So let's go to our repository package and let's create a new class. Let's name that as, let's create an interface, and let's name that as employees repository. So first thing which we need to do to use JPA is, like, we will be extending CRUD repository. I'll say CRUD repository, and here it is asking what is the types we are using. So since we are using employees Pojo, I'll say it will be of type employees, and here we need to give our primary key data type. So our primary key is ID and its data type is integer, so I'm providing the same. Again I'm clicking on Ctrl+Shift+O so that the employee class will get imported. So now let's go to our test package, and in our test package let's write a new class and name it as employees application test. So here we will annotate our test class with Spring Boot test, and just to get the suggestions, you can just write and do control space, so you will get the suggestions and you can choose whatever you want. So this is one of the shortcut, and here let me write my test class. I'll say public void test create. So first let's insert and see, and I will annotate my method with @test, Ctrl+Shift+O. So here I'll be first creating an instance to my employees class, employee equal to new employee. Let me import them. So this got imported, employees. So let's set data to our employees. I'll say e dot set id $100. I'll say e dot set ename. I'll just say Avinash. E dot set designation. I'll say senior developer. E dot set sal. I'll just say $1,000. And since we have used double, let's make it double. I just say 1000D so that it will take it as double. So now we need to inject our employee repository. So for that I'll just inject my employee repository, control space employees repository, control space employees repository @auto wired. So let's click on Control Shift O. So employee repositories got imported and employee auto wired also got imported. So let's import. So now let's use our employees repository and let's insert employees repository dot save. So we're just giving save, nothing else. So let's run this test method and see what's happening. Let me right click and click on run as and run as JUnit test. So this is in green, which means our test case got executed. So now let's go to our table and check if records got inserted or not into our employee table. So let me right click, select start from employees. See, our record got inserted. It says 100 Avinash senior developer and 1000. So we have just used this method save. We haven't written any query, we haven't written any DAO interfaces or DAO MPLs. We have just written the method save and our details got imported. So this is how we will be using save method of JPA.